Listen closely to what FBI Director Kash Patel promised under oath during his confirmation hearing. Then watch those exact words become the standard that destroys his credibility. In just 12 minutes of methodical questioning, Representative Deborah Ross would use Kash Patel's own sworn testimony, promising no politicization, no retaliation, no terminations for case assignments to prove he had systematically violated every promise through 3 documented cases. Brian Driscoll, Medal of Valor recipient, asked, "Who did you vote for?" then fired. Steve Jensen, praised by Kash Patel himself as exemplary, then terminated after January 6th investigations. And Walter Gardina, decorated combat veteran, removed after investigating Russian interference and Trump allies. Ross didn't expect FBI Director Kash Patel to have no defense when confronted with his own words from February 3rd confirmation testimony. Kash Patel didn't expect a former public defender to have obtained legal evidence, including lawsuit documents, personnel files, and his own public statements that would prove before Congress he had flunked his own test by doing exactly what he swore under oath would never happen. March 20th, 2025, 3:34 p.m. House Judiciary Committee, Rayburn House Office Building. Representative Deborah Ross from North Carolina sat with documents that would expose the systematic politicization of the FBI under FBI Director Kash Patel, using the most devastating evidence possible: Kash Patel's own sworn promises. The former public defender and state legislator had spent weeks preparing not partisan attacks but prosecutorial cross-examination, using the witness's own statements to prove institutional failure. FBI Director Kash Patel sat behind the witness table in his perfectly pressed suit, confident after deflecting 3 hours of partisan questioning with practiced bureaucratic language. He had survived attacks by dismissing them as political theater, deflected accountability questions with claims of operational success, and maintained that the FBI under his leadership operated with complete independence from political considerations. But Deborah Ross had been waiting patiently through all of it, occasionally taking careful notes. Other members of Congress had their confrontational moments in cable news soundbites. Ross was waiting to do something more effective than confrontation. She would hold Kash Patel accountable to his own standard, using documented legal evidence he couldn't deny. "Director Patel," Ross began, her voice carrying the calm precision of a defense attorney about to destroy a prosecution witness. "I want to read you something from your confirmation hearing." She lifted the transcript with deliberate care, finding a page she'd already marked with precision. At 3:35 p.m., exactly 1 minute into her questioning, Ross would deploy the weapon that would demolish Kash Patel's credibility: his own words. "On February 3rd of this year, Senator Durbin asked you directly about FBI politicization. Your response, and I quote, 'There will be no politicization of the FBI under my leadership. No retaliation against agents for their work on specific cases. Personnel decisions will not be based on case assignments. The FBI will remain independent of political considerations.'" Ross looked up from the transcript, her expression neutral but her eyes locked on Kash Patel. "Do you remember making that statement under oath, Director?" The question seemed simple, but everyone in the hearing room understood it was a prosecutorial trap being set with methodical precision. Kash Patel couldn't deny his own sworn testimony given to Congress during confirmation. "Yes, Congresswoman, and I stand by that commitment," Kash Patel responded, maintaining his confident posture. "Good," Ross interrupted smoothly, "because I'd like to test that commitment against some specific cases. If your statement was truthful, these cases should be easily explained. If it wasn't, we'll see." The setup was complete. Ross had locked FBI Director Kash Patel into his own standard before Congress. Now she would systematically prove he had violated every promise. "Let's start with Brian Driscoll," Ross continued, shifting from abstract principles to devastating specifics. "Are you familiar with that name, Director?" Kash Patel's confident expression flickered slightly. The shift from general testimony to specific names was dangerous territory he hadn't prepared for. "I'm familiar with many FBI personnel," Patel deflected weakly. "Brian Driscoll, specifically," Ross pressed with prosecutorial insistence. "Approximately 20 years of FBI service, Medal of Valor recipient, led the critical incident response group. Do you know who I'm referring to?" The specific details left no room for vagueness. Ross was establishing before Congress that this was a real person with documented service and legal evidence of his career, not a hypothetical scenario. "I believe I know the individual you're referencing," Kash Patel conceded. "Excellent," Ross said, her tone suggesting nothing was excellent about what was coming. "Mr. Driscoll filed a lawsuit, ongoing litigation, alleging that during a security review conducted by your administration, he was asked about his political preferences and how he voted in the last election. When he refused to answer those questions, citing their inappropriateness, he was removed from his position." The specificity was devastating. Ross wasn't making vague allegations before Congress. She had legal evidence in the form of lawsuit documents that could be verified or denied. Kash Patel attempted his standard deflection used throughout the hearing. "Congresswoman, personnel decisions involve multiple factors that I cannot discuss in open session." "I'm not asking about multiple factors," Ross interrupted, her voice sharpening with the force of someone who had cross-examined hundreds of evasive witnesses. "I'm asking a yes or no question. Was Brian Driscoll asked about his political preferences during a security review?" The yes or no demand eliminated wiggle room. Kash Patel had to either confirm the political questioning documented in legal evidence or deny allegations under oath. Security reviews can involve a range of questions to assess. Patel tried again. "That's not a no," Ross stated flatly, her prosecutorial instincts fully engaged. "In fact, your refusal to deny it confirms it happened." A 20-year FBI veteran, Medal of Valor recipient, was asked about his political views and voting preferences. Then, when he refused to answer those inappropriate questions, he was removed from his leadership position. Ross paused, letting the documented facts settle into the official Congress record. "Director Patel, you promised no politicization, but asking agents about their political preferences and then removing them when they refuse to answer is the textbook definition of politicization. How do you reconcile this case with your sworn testimony to this committee?" Kash Patel had no good answer. Confirming the political questions would prove politicization. Denying them would contradict legal evidence in lawsuit documents filed by a Medal of Valor recipient. His silence spoke volumes about guilt he couldn't articulate. Ross didn't wait for an answer she knew wouldn't come. At 3:38 p.m., 3 minutes into her questioning, she moved to the second case that would prove a pattern rather than isolated incident. "Let's move to our second case, Steve Jensen. You're familiar with that name, aren't you, Director?" This time, Kash Patel's discomfort was visibly greater. "I've worked with many FBI personnel," he deflected weakly. "Steve Jensen specifically," Ross pressed, building the legal evidence with documented details. "Senior official who managed terrorism, counterintelligence, and organized crime operations. In fact, Director, you personally praised Mr. Jensen in public statements earlier this year. Do you remember praising his work?" The trap tightened before Congress and cameras. Ross had documentation of FBI Director Kash Patel praising Jensen publicly, which made what came next even more damning. "I may have made statements recognizing various personnel," Patel offered weakly. "You did," Ross confirmed, pulling out another document that would serve as irrefutable legal evidence. "March 14th, you called Steve Jensen an exemplary FBI professional with decades of critical experience. Those were your exact words, Director. So I'm sure you can explain why just 2 months later, Mr. Jensen was removed from the FBI." The timeline was devastating testimony before Congress. Kash Patel had praised Jensen publicly, then fired him within weeks. The contradiction was undeniable even to his Republican defenders in the hearing room. Personnel transitions occur for various operational reasons, Patel attempted, his confidence visibly crumbling. Mr. Jensen alleges with supporting documentation that constitutes legal evidence that he was removed specifically because he worked on January 6 investigations and faced political pressure regarding those cases. Ross stated with prosecutorial precision, "Is that allegation false?" Ross had moved from asking whether something happened to challenging FBI Director Kash Patel to deny documented allegations under oath before Congress. The burden of proof had completely shifted. "Congresswoman, individual personnel matters involve confidential considerations that Patel tried his bureaucratic escape. So you cannot deny it," Ross stated flatly. not allowing evasion. Steve Jensen, whom you yourself called exemplary, was removed from the FBI after working on January 6th investigations. That directly contradicts your promise that personnel decisions would not be based on case assignments. The second case was now documented in official Congress testimony. Ross had proven using legal evidence that an agent Kash Patel himself had praised was removed after working on politically sensitive investigations targeting Trump allies. At 3:40 p.m., 6 minutes into questioning, Ross deployed the third case that would establish an undeniable pattern before Congress. Let's examine our third case, Ross continued with methodical precision. Walter Gardina, war veteran, FBI agent who worked on investigations related to Russian interference in the 2016 election and matters involving individuals close to President Trump. Mr. Gardina was also removed from the FBI. Are you familiar with his case? 3 names now. 3 documented cases with legal evidence. The pattern was becoming mathematically impossible to dismiss as coincidence before Congress and the American public watching. Congresswoman, I cannot discuss specific personnel. Kash Patel tried his standard deflection one more time. I'm not asking you to discuss, Ross interrupted. I'm asking you to deny. If these allegations are false, say so under oath. Tell Congress that Gardina was not removed because of Russia investigations. Ross had reversed the burden completely. Kash Patel's silence lasted 18 seconds on C-SPAN cameras, more damning than any confession. Your silence answers the question, Ross stated with certainty. At 3:41 p.m., Ross delivered her synthesis. 3 cases, Director. 3 agents documented in legal evidence. Driscoll asked about voting, then fired. Jensen, praised by you, then removed after January 6th. Gardina, removed after Russian interference investigations. Ross closed her folder. These aren't isolated decisions. This is a pattern contradicting your sworn oath. Agents who work politically sensitive cases have been systematically removed, Ross continued, not for performance, not for misconduct, but for investigating cases politically inconvenient to Trump. I'm using your own standard, Ross interrupted Patel's weak defense. You set this test during confirmation. You promised no politicization, no retaliation, no personnel decisions based on cases. I've presented 3 specific examples backed by legal evidence, lawsuits, records, your own statements. At 3:43 p.m., Ross delivered the moral conclusion. Institutional integrity isn't maintained through confirmation promises, it's maintained through actions. You made promises to Congress. The American people relied on them, but your actions systematically violated those promises. She gestured to documents before her, physical legal evidence of broken promises. Driscoll's career shouldn't have ended because he refused to answer voting questions. Jensen's decades of experience shouldn't have been discarded because he investigated January 6th. Gardina's service shouldn't have been terminated because he investigated Russian interference. Ross's voice carried constitutional duty. These men served their country. They did their jobs investigating crimes regardless of political implications. That's exactly what FBI agents are supposed to do, and they were punished for it. That's exactly what you promised wouldn't happen. At 3:44 p.m., Ross delivered the defining line. You didn't fail someone else's test, Director. You failed your own test. The phrase hung in the hearing room, simple, devastating, undeniable before Congress and cameras. The standard you're judged against isn't mine, it's yours. The promises weren't made to me. They were made under oath to the United States Senate, and the verdict based on legal evidence is clear. You have politicized the FBI, you have retaliated against agents, you have made personnel decisions based on case assignments. Everything you promised wouldn't happen has happened. She gestured to the documents before her, physical legal evidence of broken promises. Brian Driscoll's career shouldn't have ended because he refused to answer questions about how he voted. Steve Jensen's decades of experience shouldn't have been discarded because he investigated January 6th. Walter Gardina's service to this country shouldn't have been terminated because he investigated Russian interference. Ross's voice carried both disappointment and constitutional duty. These men served their country. They did their jobs investigating crimes and threats, regardless of political implications. That's exactly what FBI agents are supposed to do, and they were punished for it. That's exactly what you promised wouldn't happen. At 3:44 p.m., 10 minutes into her questioning, Ross delivered the line that would become the defining summary of Kash Patel's tenure as FBI director. "You didn't fail someone else's test, Director. You failed your own test." The phrase hung in the hearing room. Simple, devastating, undeniable. The standard you're being judged against isn't mine. It's yours. The promises weren't made to me. They were made under oath to the United States Senate during your confirmation. And the verdict, based on documented legal evidence, is clear. You have politicized the FBI. You have retaliated against agents. You have made personnel decisions based on case assignments. Everything you promised wouldn't happen has happened. Ross yielded back her time at 3:46 p.m., having spent exactly 12 minutes systematically destroying FBI Director Kash Patel's credibility, using nothing but his own words and documented facts that constituted irrefutable legal evidence. The aftermath was immediate. Within minutes, "You flunked your own test" trended globally. News displayed side by side Kash Patel's February promises versus March terminations. Democrats cited Ross's legal evidence in resignation demands. The three names became symbols of politicization. FBI Director Kash Patel swore would never happen.